Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. If we may kindly take our seats. Ladies and gentlemen, our program is about to begin. Please take your seats. Thank you.
Welcome to Tonga. My name is Nova, and I'd just like to tell a little story about what was happened when the tsunami appeared here in this area. I was thinking first that I have to come back to my house and close all the windows, but then they tell me, please don't go back, it's very dangerous, so we leave.
It wasn't until around 24 hours later we started having satellite phone contact, and we heard the remarkable news that everyone had evacuated very well and that there were only a small number of fatalities. We were shocked and surprised by how such a big event caused so little loss of life.
Truly effective early warning systems lead to life-saving actions. Around the world, multi-hazard early warning systems are saving lives and protecting communities. But what makes them truly effective? An early warning only works if it is inclusive and accessible, if everyone that receives it understands it and is empowered to act.
Personally, pag may disaster, hirap na run to ask for help. Paggalaw-galaw ko, kung ano yung kukunin ko ng mga bagay, kung I'm not prepared.
Persons with disabilities must be engaged. They're part of the solution, not the problem. Early warnings enable communities to make informed decisions and take early action. They ensure people can get out of harm's way before a disaster occurs. They can also help communities make informed decisions in the face of slow onset events like droughts. When early warning systems are user-centered, they're built around the realities and needs of those they are meant to serve.
আপনারা যে পরামর্শটা আমাদের দিবেন আগাম সেই পরামর্শ অনুযায়ী আমরা সেইভাবে ব্যবস্থা করে রাখবো আর কি ওদের যে রকম প্রয়োজনীয় পরিবেশে রাখার দরকার যাতে ক্ষতি না হয় তাহলে তো আমরা উন্নত হব আর কি এটা রাখার জন্য আমরা খুব চেষ্টা করব বা এরকম সংকেত যদি ভবিষ্যতে আমরা পাই তাহলে আমরা খুবই গর্বিত
Early warnings empower communities to take action and build resilience. Countries in Central Asia are developing a regional early warning system for trans-boundary hazards. These systems support critical cooperation in areas where disasters order. We must work together to save lives and livelihoods. Every day counts. Invest in early warnings today.
Ladies and gentlemen, early warning saves lives, but early warning also has to be accessible, particularly to the most marginalized among us. My name is Anita Erskine, and that's the essence of our high-level dialogue this morning, advancing multi-standard, multi-hazard early warnings and early and anticipatory action. User-centered design for a resilient future has to be our standard. You are very warmly welcome. Please, a round of applause for yourselves. Thank you. And if you did participate in the Early Warnings for All forum earlier this week, we would like to hear from you. Our Slido QR code will be up on the screen. We would like to know what your key takeaways were. Assuming you weren't part of this conversation, this high-level dialogue will give you an opportunity to engage with us exactly through the same Slido QR code that you will see. We've got a question there, we've got a few statements, and we would love for you to engage with us. Talking about engagement, the program today will start off with a fireside chat. I have Professor Celeste Saulo, the Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, and Mr. Kamal Kishore, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, joining us this morning. A round of applause as I join them. One, two. Thank you. We'll just do a quick mic check. Good morning, Mr. Kishore. How are you?
I'm very well.
Celeste, and you?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Fantastic. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to start off with you, Professor Saulo, and ask you to kick us off by explaining to our participants here, both online and in person, where do we stand globally when it comes to countries reporting on the status of their early warning signs?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that question that allows me to make some remarks. First, the good news is that we have 108 countries that told us that they have multi-hazard early warning systems in place. But these are 108 countries out of 193. So that shows us there is still a long way ahead. Secondly, I would like to highlight this. This is about national meteorological and hydrological services. So it's important to recognize that the authorities that are behind providing these early warning systems are national meteorological services. And here is where I can put some further remarks. So whenever we have to explain that a hazard is coming, and I would say 90% of hazards come from the atmosphere or water or are related with weather and climate in one way or another, it starts with observations. So you need data. And behind the data is data sharing. It's not only about one country using their own observations. It's about data sharing. And I'm quite proud to comment that 85% of the data globally is shared in a window of 25 minutes. So whenever you take a data, let's say in Bhutan, another data in Colombia, the world will know about that observation in just 25 minutes. And that is thanks to the WMO. So that is okay. That is, I would say, a big achievement. So first on the observing side, it's something we are very proud of, the observation gathering, the observation sharing. And then this is the basis for better global model forecasts. So we do have structures for global model forecasts. These are also shared, are produced by 10 to 15 global centers around the world, but are shared freely. And that is another achievement of this system, to share all these global forecasts. Of course, is this enough? No, it's not enough. Why? Because the level of granularity of these global forecasts usually are not sufficient to really address the very local aspects, the very local problems we need to address when it comes to a hazard. So that's why we need to translate, we need to put more intelligence, I would say, in terms of gaining granularity, gaining description. And then it comes what we know, AI and other techniques to improve the quality of forecast. And then Another step here is something where the hydromet services are really moving forward, is changing this perspective from just, for example, providing precipitation forecasts and moving to impact-based forecasts. This is quite a big jump in terms of science, because you get out from the model a number, let's say precipitation, let's say temperature, let's say wind, but usually the population does not understand. 100 millimeters, what does it mean?
Right.
Will I get flooded or not? So that is moving to impact-based forecasts. And the third thing I would like to highlight is that we are also moving to be very, very precise in terms of what hazard. You may be expecting thunderstorms. Thunderstorms, maybe it's heavy rain, maybe it's hail, maybe it's electric activity, and electric activity is killing people. So it's about gaining that specificity in terms of what hazard are we expecting. So more or less, there we are. We are quite proud of the work done by the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, and we need to support them to go further.
Progress, but a few more steps to take. Completely understood. So, Mr. Kishore, for you, as we approach Early Warnings for All initiative, we're approaching the midpoint. What are your top priorities for accelerating progress in the months ahead?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for coming early morning on Friday after a very busy week. We had 1.5 days of discussions on multi-stakeholder forum on early warning system earlier this week as well. So a lot of discussion on early warnings. Before I talk about the priorities, I just want to say that the work on early warning has been going on for quite some time. We will later hear from Margareta Wallström what the whole history of this work since Hurricane Mitch in 1998. But in the last few years, it has gained a renewed sense of urgency. I think Secretary General's call for ensuring early warning for all has become a sort of rallying call across the world. Wherever I go, in whichever part, from the Pacific to the Caribbean to Africa to Asia, landlocked countries, small island developing countries, emerging economies, advanced economies, everywhere early warning is being talked about. And in many countries, I see a renewed sense of confidence in early warning systems. When I go to Fiji and I hear that there are 2 cyclones that formed within a space of weeks, there is no panic. There is a system in place. Public has much greater trust in the information that they are given. And of course, all of it is accompanied with new 21st century challenges of misinformation and disinformation as well. So a lot of momentum, and as Celeste said, that 108 countries now report that they have a multi-hazard early warning system. The question, of course, to ask is, where are the remaining? Why is it not 100%? So with that preface, let me say what are the 3 priorities that I see. First priority is that we really have to make information on impending hazards available in an understandable, actionable, usable format in a very timely fashion. This is not something we can take for granted. There is huge advances that Celeste talked about in forecasting and warning, but there is no use telling somebody living on the coastline that you are going to get 180 kilometers per hour. You have to tell that, this would mean that all the coconut palms will be uprooted, thatch roof houses will get destroyed, and these are the preventive actions you need to take. So I think there is quite a lot of work still to be done in that area. A part of that is making the most of the technology we have now for dissemination. One of the partners in the Early Warning for All ITU is working at that. Right now, less than 50 countries use cell broadcast for disseminating warnings. It should be 100%. So I think this whole thing, I would draw a big circle around making early warnings available in a usable, actionable, understandable format in a timely fashion. I think we have a lot more work to do there. The second thing I want to say is that while we have a 2027 deadline, even those countries that have made progress, they have to continuously do it. This is not something you do once. You have to continually upgrade your systems, look for the blind spots that you may have, keep up with the changes in technology, and so on. I'll just give you one example. After the Indian Ocean tsunami in 16 months, we had a tsunami early warning system for the Indian Ocean, and we had declared victory. In my recent visit to some Pacific Island nations, I see that there are still blind spots. There are areas that are actually not yet covered by tsunami early warning systems. There is a lot of detail in there. So we will continue to find such gaps, and those we have to close with a sense of urgency. And my third and final point is that we talk about inclusive early warning system a lot, but I think there is a lot more to be done. Of course, now when you look at evacuation plans, the needs of persons with disability, older persons is accounted for. But I think vulnerabilities at the local level are very unique. And it is not something that you can sort of legislate from, forget international level, even national level. It has to be really local. There has to be agency from the local level to identify who are these groups, what are not just their vulnerabilities, but what are their capacities, what are their unique insights, and weave that into local level planning on acting on early warning system. So I think my top line there is that on inclusion, we've talked more than we've done.
So as Professor Salo, as Mr. Kishore has just highlighted, yep, we've talked about it. We need to be a little bit more hands-on. We need to act a bit faster. I want to come to the biggest technical, or perhaps maybe you call it institutional levers, that from the perspective of WMO, we need to strengthen next to close this gap.
Yes, certainly there are many opportunities to close gaps. Let me start for the technical ones. The technical ones, I mentioned in my first intervention the importance of the observing system. Well, there are huge gaps. Although we share many data, there are still many data that is not shared. So this is something that we need to work collectively. Secondly, I would say that, of course, the needs of all the countries are not the same. But when we speak about radars, for example, infrastructure radars, these are expensive, but these are absolutely needed for many of the hazards that are impacting different communities. So that infrastructure is expensive, is hard to maintain, and that is where we need more investments. Of course, when it comes to investments, I would say we have also a challenge in terms of sustainable finance. This is something usually Kamal mentions. We cannot move forward without sustainable finance. And that sustainable finance, for me, has two pieces. One piece, of course, is external support for countries that are lagging behind. Yes, we need to support them because they are lagging behind. But at the same time, we need institutional, local, governmental ownership. Because, of course, governments will realize the importance of having these better monitoring systems in place. And then they will take responsibility on the maintenance, on the continuity, on the improvement. As Kamal mentioned, this is not just one shot. It has to continue. We have seen developed countries exposed to terrible hazards and catastrophes. So I would say that in terms of institutional gaps or institutional challenges, not the technological ones, I would like to highlight this, the sustained financing mechanisms, and also the internal institutional arrangements. I will repeat once and many, many times, the role of the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services here are crucial. They are not the only actor, of course. You have risk managers, you have communications, you have stakeholders. Yes, you need all these actors in place. You cannot make a decision on something that you did not take into consideration from the very beginning. This is the inclusive kind of approach.
Yeah.
It's about the whole value cycle. And then I would say that we need to leverage digital transformation.
Right.
This is a huge opportunity, a gap, but a huge opportunity. So again, WMO stands ready to support to all the pieces of this puzzle, and in particular, the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Kishore, I want to finish off with, your thoughts, your calls to action, but specifically, we've just concluded the first Global Early Warnings for All Multi-Stakeholder Forum earlier on this week. So from your perspective, what were the most important outcomes? And perhaps while you're finishing those, what gives you hope?
I think the most remarkable thing about the multi-stakeholder forum was that it really enlarged the conversation. For a day and a half, we had 600 people. There were overflow rooms in WMO where the forum was being held, and they were all full. And they were bringing together stakeholders or actors who have not engaged so much in the past. I think the biggest hope I have is that early warning and potential of use of early warning is seen not just for life-saving, but also protecting our economies, protecting livelihoods. So now it's not just the traditional sectoral users like agriculture, but also infrastructure managers, energy managers, transport managers are coming into the fold and looking at how they can use early warning to optimize their operations, reduce their losses, ensure that the infrastructure service disruption is minimized. So I think that's really great. Early warnings potential is far beyond saving lives. It can save livelihoods. It can make our economies more robust, our services more robust, and so on. So I think that's one thing. What is a cause of concern, and Celeste alluded to it, is that we need more resources to sustain this effort. It's not like there are no resources going into early warning systems, but 80% of the resources, at least the global resources, international resources, are going to a handful of countries. There is much greater need in smaller economies for investment in early warning systems. And parts of that, as Celeste was mentioning, if you strengthen early warning system in any part of the world, if you strengthen observational systems, any part in the world, it basically feeds to the global system, and it's a global public good. It needs to be recognized like that.
All right. And so to you, Professor Silo, 1 minute to share what you believe you're hopeful about.
I'm hopeful about the results of the Early Warnings for All initiative in terms of bringing momentum and raising awareness. And I'm hopeful because I heard so many nice stories. And I will share with you a story from the director of the Met Service of Malawi. When she knew of the launch of the Early Warnings for All and she didn't have one in place, she expressed to me, "What will I do?" That was her thinking. And then, thanks to her willingness to do something, thanks to the support, the institutional support, the resource mobilization that was put in place, in particular, in this case, Cruz supported her. Now she's quite proud of having an early warning system in Malawi. But more than that, now Malawi will be the first case where we will try AI for early warning systems. So I'm full of hope because these stories are happening, and this is thanks to the involvement and engagement of all of us.
And so with that very hopeful tone, we come to the end of the Fireside Chat. Starting off our program this morning, please a warm round of applause for the Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization, Professor Celeste Saulo, and Mr. Kamal Kishore, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction. Thank you so much for joining us. And as they leave the stage, I would like to invite onto the stage another leader who has guided global DRR efforts. Ms. Margareta Wallström is the former Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and former President of the Swedish Red Cross Society, currently the President of the Swedish Solidarity Committee for Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Margareta Wallström.
Well, thank you so much, Kemal, for asking me to provide a potted history of the early warning systems of the world. I have 5 minutes, so it will be not the thousands of years where people have learned to read the nature as the early warning, and this is something that many of you know. So I will focus on a few things that have taken place after the end of the Second World War. So, in November 1970, the cyclone Bola, you remember that, struck Bangladesh, the Bay of Bengal. At that time, it was still East Pakistan, and a minimum of 300,000 people perished. Some figures say 400,000, say 500,000. So, looking at what has happened after that, I would actually say that the Bay of Bengal is probably one of the most dangerous places to live in, as 22 years later, it was hit by another superstorm and a storm surge called Nina, where 138,000 people perished. By that time, probably the accounting was better. If you look up Bola at the internet, which we all do these days, you would find a few details that relate as well to today. The survivors were mostly men between the ages of 18 and 46. 50% of the persons who died were children. There were some comments about elderly people that were vulnerable, but women were not even mentioned. I'm sure if you dig deeper into all the research on the topic, women will be mentioned, but this is what many people read when they look at the internet. So, before I go on Bola, between 1950 and 2023, I have only listed 10 disasters, 8 of which had a big amount of more than 100,000 people killed. And that's 2023. So in all that to say, the way we measure progress is important. And early warning for most of us is really about saving lives. Now, what are the type of disasters that kill most people? Well, Bola was a super cyclone. Earthquakes. The tsunami was mentioned by Kemal in his talk. We have the Haiti earthquakes. We have more earthquakes. But the multi-hazard warning system that is now driving its force around the world also covers, of course, drought, agricultural drought. You are making progress on trying to figure out when earthquakes are going to happen. So it's a much wider broader spectrum of multi-hazard system, which is really what we need to take to heart. So where are we then with early warning system? One of the persons that was cited in Ebola, 1970, 55 years ago, one of the survivors said, yes, we heard the warning, but we didn't understand. There was a warning, but it didn't translate into an understandable message to the people that needed it most. However, even before Ebola, a major cyclone preparedness and early warning system had started, exactly in Bangladesh and I think in India, in the Bay of Bengal region. It was a shelter, an early warning program. And of course, after Ebola, it gained enormous support. So just a few years after, the League, that time it was called the League of Red Cross, started together with its partners in Bangladesh, a preparedness and early warning cyclone shelters program that still today is the one that is working. UN entered this. So with extensive international support, just as we need today, they could move on in the important issues. Nevertheless, I won't go into all the figures, but Ebola remains the absolutely deadliest disaster since 1950. But as I said, we are not seemingly making fast enough progress on the saving lives because the figures remain high in all the worst disasters. Sendai and its predecessors, they have always given high priority to early warning. But now all of you here, government, civil society, UN, you have committed to a major step forward. So what I think needs to be given particular attention to is you have the technology, you are enthusiastic about it, but I commented to my colleague from Vanuatu, when I see how AI is translating what people say, I'm not so sure that early warning messages will be completely clear either. So a little bit of, yes, enthusiasm, but also caution. Sorry to make a joke about that, but it is important. Because I think if we're going to get control of these high numbers of deadly events, we really need to recognize that resilience is built from bottom up. And that what you do as governments have to meet that halfway with maybe civil society and communities in the middle. So really invest in that most complicated, actually, end of the line where people, communities who know something about dangers and risks, who have some kind of early warning systems, but not as sophisticated as the one that you want to do. They are absolutely the primary purpose of what you're doing now. The second thing, the message is, even the people who survive can die after the emergency because their property is gone, they don't have any networks, the recovery, reconstruction doesn't include everyone, it misses communities. So if somehow you can bring together the understanding of that disasters drive poverty and deprive people of jobs, education, and livelihoods, then even more lives will be saved. This is as much, and maybe even more with the growing wealth in the world, as much as a challenge as 55 years ago in Bangladesh. And then, a final comment. I heard this from a senior official from a government that has a really good system for earthquake early warning and floods and weather events. He explained that, but he ended by saying, we know this, we understand, we have a good system, but we don't know what to do in the face of all these extreme events that we see now being generated. For that, we don't know. And he ended with the question, does anyone have an advice? No one in that meeting had an advice, but I think that's also what we have to calculate for where we go forward together. So that was probably my message today. know that you're standing on very good experiences from many, many decades of years, that these big events, they take many lives. They've done it for thousands of years. We now have better data. We know what to do. So I thank you for taking this initiative and moving forward with it. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Marguerite Wallström. Another round of applause. And with her powerful reflections, I come to yours, submitted by Slido. EW4All provides practical illustration of the benefits of collaboration among countries and institutions across society. We have another reflection that says early warning for all should be reliable, understandable, and accessible. Really positive to hear examples and talk about institutionalizing inclusive EWs. And some very diverse and representative panels, which was really great to see. However, there is still a long way to go to achieve inclusive EWS at scale and implemented. Finally, it needs to be not only early warnings for all, but early warnings by all. And I believe that the panel discussion coming up will exemplify some of these key takeaways that you've had. We are going to be having a conversation that will examine lessons from recent regional fora, strategies for financing, innovative partnerships, and community-based approaches that ensure these systems reach the very last mile. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome to the stage my contributors for the panel discussion, Mr. Glenroy Blanchette, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of National Security, St. Kitts and Nevis. Please warmly welcome him. Ambassador Deke Potzel, Special Envoy for Middle East Humanitarian Issues and Director General for Crisis Prevention, Stabilization, Peace Building and Humanitarian Assistance, Federal Foreign Office, Germany. We're joined virtually by Mr. Michel Lies, who is the Chairman, Zurich Insurance, and here in person by Mr. Gunsham Siborun, Board Member, Africa World Farmers Organization. Last, definitely not the least, Ms. Flora Vano, Country Manager, Action Aid, Vanuatu. Ladies and gentlemen, please warmly welcome our panelists. Thank you very much. To each of the panelists, this will be a microphone. Perhaps we start off with you, Mr. Blanchette. We're talking about, of course, EW4All, but let's focus on St. Kitts and Nevis, recently hosting the regional EW4All Multi-Stakeholder Forum for the Americas and the Caribbean. Please share some of your key takeaways from this forum and perhaps also some of the biggest lessons that you have observed from across the region.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Erskine, for this opportunity to speak to a critical issue that is confronting us all. The forum brought together many stakeholders from across the world to identify gaps and challenges and to explore opportunities for improved multi-hazard early warning systems. Now, there are a few key takeaways from that event. In the first instance, it created greater awareness of the importance of early warning systems for protecting lives and livelihoods. According to the ILO, warning systems is capable of saving many lives and reducing damage by as much as 30% if activated within 24 hours before the event. So that tells us how important early warning systems are to saving lives and livelihood. Another key takeaway from the event was the need for stronger regulatory frameworks and increased financial resources for the expansion of multi-hazard early warning systems to safeguard investments in vulnerable communities. Now, disaster risk financing remains very weak in the region. risk-informed investment are not keeping pace with the growing needs of small island developing states. Yes, early warning systems have expanded, but they are still far from being universal, as alluded to earlier. Early warning systems must be accessible, they must be inclusive, and they must also be backed by high-level commitment, as well as appropriate policy, legal, institutional, and administrative frameworks to ensure that they are sustainable. There are a few lessons that stood out from across the region. That is, one, the success of early warning systems depends on broad stakeholder participation in their design and implementation. Small island development states have limited resources, especially technical capacities. They lack comprehensive risk assessments and experience a lot of communication challenges. So therefore, communities must be empowered to take ownership of whatever is being given to them, especially in the area of risk communication, because that's what early warning systems tend to do in part. Yes, there is the sender of the message, there is the message itself, there is the receiver of the message, there is the channel through which that message is sent, but also what is important is trust. And one way of building trust is when people who are being asked to respond, that they are part of the process of designing whatever policy or whatever institutional framework that is being put in place. And there's also the legal and institutional framework that govern all early warning systems. They must be sustainable. There should not be any one-off thing. Communities must be able to continue the process for a very long time, from generation to generation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, I go to you, Ambassador Potzel. I mean, we're talking about early warnings for all, so perhaps we also need to highlight that they need to be cost effective, especially at the country level. Now, how can countries ensure that financing mechanisms are designed to support both anticipatory action and post-disaster recovery?
Thank you. Thank you. Is that working? Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and a very good morning to each and everyone. I think first and foremost, it is important to understand that they are all part of one toolbox, right? So financing DRR, resilience building, anticipatory action, rapid response, but also recovery, they need to work together. And once you see the importance of bringing those together, I think the answers are relatively clear. And we are convinced that the more anticipatory work that is done, the better for the people. And it was said, this is about saving lives. And this is exactly what drives us too. And we see that it works in a lot of examples. And I will cite one from Zimbabwe, where we work very closely with the German NGO, the Welthungerhilfe, in saving livelihoods by going in early. If you see, there's a forecasted drought, then you go in early, you can help people saving livestock, saving their livelihoods, and that also contributes to long-term resilience. One of the beneficiaries there put it really nicely. She said, when the cattle is fat, you set the price. When the cattle is skinny, the buyer sets the price. So this is like the long-term resilience aspect of what we're achieving also with anticipatory action. And we are very happy to see that anticipatory action has gained momentum. The Global Overview Report on AA, which is launched by the Anticipation Hub, said that in 2024, more activations and more active frameworks have been seen. But still, a lot of the disasters can be predicted, but still only 2% of the humanitarian budgets, for instance, are being spent on anticipatory action. So we need to move ahead, and a lot has to do with political will. Now, how do you get the political will? First, you have to acknowledge the importance. Then you have to understand that what you're doing really works. And then, as it was said, you have to bring in the people who are actually suffering from it, or who are the ones affected by it. We set ourselves the target in Germany to spend 5% of our humanitarian budget for anticipatory action. And we would love to see more countries joining us in doing that. We are very happy that, for instance, the SERF is spending 10% of the budget on anticipatory, because it really works. One other thing that is really important to us, and it was mentioned before by the president of WMO, is government ownership. And that really needs to be strengthened, as it was described. Disaster response laws should allow allocations for all stages of disaster management cycle, including anticipatory action, but also post-disaster recovery. And I could give you many more examples, but I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
No problem at all, Ambassador. Thank you so much. So I bring the conversation to you, Mr. Lies. I mean, we've heard it earlier on in the fireside chat. It needs to be, EW needs to be localized. We've just heard that, the communication has to be clear, also that we have to be cost effective. Let's bring in the conversation with the insurance sector. How would this sector, which you represent, play a catalytic role in promoting risk prevention and mitigation? Now, of course, we would like you to also focus on public-private partnerships, including governments, including businesses and communities. Share your thoughts with us, Mr. Lies.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So thank you very much, Anita. And thank you also for pronouncing my name Lies and not Lies, which would be quite terrible for an insurer. The accent is important. So let's take a little bit of distance, and I would like definitely to take the opportunity to speak about the role of insurance. And by the way, sorry not to be by you. I'm in Zurich, but actually I came from the summit of the Insurance Development Forum, which is an organization that Kamal knows very well, and I will mention a little bit about the Insurance Development Forum later, because it's a form of public-private partnership which goes quite well. I do believe that the insurance sector is definitely uniquely positioned to act as both financial safety net and a strategic enabler of a disaster risk reduction. Insurance is not just about post-disaster recovery. It's a proactive form that can shape behaviors, incentivize resilience, and catalyze systemic change. And I believe that the type of meeting that you're organizing is a unique opportunity for people like us to let you understand a little bit more what we do, because sometimes I get the impression that you do not totally understand. Probably we do not explain that enough, what we do. I would like to concentrate on 4 points. Catalyzing risk prevention through insurance mechanisms. The second one would be public-private partnership, the platform for scaled impact, how to enable conditions for effective public-private partnership models and aligning incentives and products. I start with catalyzing risk prevention through insurance mechanisms. Insurance can drive definitively disaster risk reduction by embedding risk reduction into underwriting, pricing, and advisory finance. For example, risk understanding as a fundamental principle and to inform decision-making, be it from decision on public spending, building zoning, or responding planning. Risk pricing acts as a market signal. When risk becomes uninsurable or unaffordable, it prompts public action, as seen in Queensland, Australia, where government investment in levies restored insurance availability. Requiring climate risk assessment and disaster risk reduction plan as prerequisite for coverage or financing ensures that resilience is built into infrastructure from the outset. I come to my second point, public-private partnership. They are essentials to scale disaster risk reduction. Insurer brings risk expertise, while government can de-risk investment and create enabling environment. The Insurance Development Forum, for example, illustrates how insurer, government, and development actors can collaborate and develop effective and innovative solutions leveraging each other's expertise. The IDF, Insurance Development Forum tripartite agreement with BMZ from Germany and the United Nations Development Programme supports sovereign risk transfer project geared to benefit over 65 million people. The Global Risk Modeling Alliance empowers countries with open source climate risk model, enabling informed decision-making and unlocking access to risk finance. My third point, how do we enable conditions for effective public-private partnership model? Early engagement means involving insurers during the planning phase of infrastructure project allows for risk engineering and exposure assessment before development begins. Access to data. Publicly available data on planning zones and infrastructure is vital for insurers to conduct resilience-focused risk assessment. Supportive policy frameworks. Government must integrate climate risk into national adaptation strategy and create regulatory environment that support innovation and blended finance. Trust and transparency, clear communication, shared objective, and transparent governance are fundamental to building trust among stakeholders. And let me finishing with aligning incentives and products. Insurer can align incentives by developing products that reward resilience, investing in resilience infrastructure through a vehicle like the IDF Infrastructure Resilience Development Fund, and supporting blended finance models where public fund de-risk private investment in adaptation. Let me simply conclude by telling you that ultimately the insurance sector role is not only to protect, but also to provoke change, signaling where risks are rising and guiding society toward more resilient future. And I'm sorry if my speech sounds a little bit actuarial, but you cannot be efficient in covering risk if you don't know what you cover. So there is a work that needs to be done in mapping the risk, in modeling the risk. And once you've done that, you can definitively be extremely efficient and concrete. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Elias. And that kind of brings me to a very key word, information, access to information, how that information is translated. So I bring that connection to you, Mr. Seaborn, the concept of farmers having access to information. What kinds of information are most valuable to them? And how can these systems be designed to enable timely and meaningful early action?
Thank you, Anista. If I may believe that by reflecting on the key message of the week, EW4All Forum, early warning system must do more than just reflect, predict. They must empower for Africa farmers, especially household. Early warning are not abstract policy tools. They are survival tool. Whether it's drought in Senegal, flood in Nigeria, or disease lost in Kenya, the need is the same: accurate, actionable, and accessible information delivery in time to act. At the World Farmers Organization, we represent farmers who are on the front line of every climate and disaster risk. What we learn is that user-centered design must start by asking the right question. Does the warning help if farmers decide when to sow or harvest? Can it reach a woman farming in a remote area with no internet? Is it integrated into a local cooperative extension services or farmers field school? Critically, we must shift these views of farmers as end users to co-creators. Farmers are on passive reception. They our data contributor and innovators across Africa, we have seen successful example where farmers contribute our ground level data like rainfall measurement, soil condition, and crop status, which complementary technical model and make prediction more local relevant. So what are the expectations for this session and the global platform at large? First, localization and integration. Embed local knowledge with a scientific model to enhance accurate and trust. Secondly, equality in access. Ensure marginalization group, women, youth, indigenous farmers are part of the system by default, not as a afterthought. Third, capacity building. Invest not just in technique, but in people, community, training, agro-advisory services, farmers, cooperative. If we truly want anticipation action to work, we must build a system for and with those who are most affected, because a warning is only used when it is understood, trusted, and acted upon. I look forward to learn from our fellow panelists and to build partnership that put farmers at the center of the early warning for a resilient future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ciberon. And that is crucial. The one call to action I get from it is don't build for them, include them in the building. Powerful. So perhaps with that perspective, I come to you, Ms. Vano. While we are building along with our communities, what would you say are the key enablers that empower these local communities to respond quickly and effectively to early warnings?
Thank you so much. That is very, very an important question to ask. In order to have a very successful response in the community, we need to create space for community to know exactly what the system that we are bringing in. That's one. We need to include them in the discussion, have them in the decision-making space so that they can also give the practicality of the realities that they are facing. Because one system might not fit everybody. It needs to tailor it also to where the risks are, where exactly each communities are located. You cannot give an early warning message for those at the coastal and it's the same similar one for those up on the mountains. It's two different communications. And I think I will give a practical example would be going towards cyclone season. We might be saying, prepare, your livelihoods. Maybe you will be talking livestock. But then those at the coastal, that's not livestock, they use marine, it's fishing. What is it that tailors to that? Now, information is power. Simplifying messaging is very important to make sure that the community knows exactly what to prepare for and how to respond. We need to allow them to be in the space and give their thinking in the design phase until implementing. Because when you are not there, government is not there, the community comes up, they did the first measures. They know their communities, they know their own risk mapping. They know what really intensify and increases during those extreme measures, weather patterns. We also seen that from the community perspective, the power of collective. Now, in country, we were seeing that when you pass information through women, the women make sure that the information is pass to all the community members, because women will put themselves first for every member of their family. They always do. It always comes to it. I will give another practical example in terms of food. You will see women will feed everybody in the family and they'll be the last because they wanted to make sure that everybody have food. And that will also goes for information. They have to pass the information to everyone. Now, technology, innovative, is really good and it's crucial to work. But where there are no reception for telephones, or you cannot reach that because of the flash flooding rivers, what are the other mechanisms that were in place? Community has indigenous knowledge. They know back in the days when there are no technology, how to pass accurate information. Now the sources of information have to be coming out from the correct source of information, not, we call it wireless, coconut wireless, like everyone wanted to give information, but we don't do that. There's a structure and ways of communication, and it needs to go, and it builds trust. Communities, families will trust their mother. A home will trust whatever the mother says. So I think it also facilitates information going. We're building it up from the bottom up, and then we create space where policymakers also comes in, and they give their thoughts on what they're doing, and then the community engage. But to enable that, we need to co-create spaces in every stages of early warning system, not only from the top, but also from the bottom going up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vano. And as you're concluding your, yes, a round of applause. As you're concluding your submission, we've got a question here for you from our audience. Based on your experience in Vanuatu, what success factors have helped trigger timely and effective early action based on your experience?
On my experience, we have seen that trusting new technology to women in the community, it is an inclusive approach, because women doesn't take this as it's not luxury, it is a necessity. We don't see it as okay, we need to now take selfies, and I think what some of people use it these days, just for photos. But it became part of the life of a woman, and it also enables that it has a very transformative impact, gender transformative impact in communities. It allows women to be more respected. And then communities turn to rely that the information we were getting from there is crucial and it's right information. We also get to see that the model that we use have to go align with the policy that the government is doing. And in order to trigger that, get the policy makers to the community. Have them seated there, but the community is creating that space. And they are triggered to know that, you know, my livelihood will be damaged, I couldn't recover because I did not prepare, because the scientific was saying this and my traditional knowledge. So bridging that gap also is very important, and letting the community to be more aware of their surroundings, and it is theirs, it benefits them, they owned it. It's not something that someone else will come and tell you and force you to do it. No, it's theirs. So once they owned it, any other measures or any early warning system we are putting across, they will just say, you know, it's ours. If we do not do it, we do not save life, we will be the one. We are facing the consequence of it. It's not government, it's not policymakers, it's us by the end of the day. So being able to have just fundings that can take you from one place to another to remodel that. And success stories. Success stories is very crucial in community. They will believe, and they will, because you have gone through it and you have seen success story change life. And in Vanuatu, we are building it from one province in Tafea, and Tafea province have to go up to Malamba province and give their narrative that we women, we were doing this, and that's what we come out. We were resilient in our economic, in our livelihoods, and in our early warning preparedness. It takes another community to tell another community the efficiency and importance of early warning. You cannot just come from another space or another country and you will try to come down. You have to contextualize your learnings also and your stories, and then you refer to the people, because at the end of the day, it's people-centered. It is the people that we are targeting, and they have to understand you, and they have to know that whatever you are saying, you have seen it worked. And for that, more funding needs to go to women's organizing on CSOs to build that from a collective perspective from the bottom up. It always has. And to be resilient, this is how we should go, and we should fund more of that local structures to enable them to be able to speak their realities, because their realities save lives, and their realities is more resilient in the coming future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vano. And so I get from perhaps at the core and at the heart of what you're sharing is this essence of localization, this demonstration that it works, but also the ownership that allows them to say this is actually built for us and to some extent by us, and so it will work. Thank you so much. Ms. Elias, we have a question for you from our audience, and it is, how can the insurance sector help strengthen and expand access to early warning systems, particularly in vulnerable and underserved communities?
Well, I'm not totally sure that the insurance sector can be the player there. There is definitely an element in which we can try to make this early warning system as efficient as possible by knowing and identifying the risk. I must say that what I do see in many of these initiatives, there is a moment in which we need to put on the table something that we try to avoid, which is how can we make these kind of things commercially viable? And I think it's quite important to realize that we can contribute definitively to create this community spirit, which has been mentioned, but there is a moment in which we need definitively to establish an understanding about what is the way in which we can make of such a system something commercially viable. And I do believe that the way in which what is protected by an early warning system can be insured, and the way in which this insurance can be probably given at a cheaper price or can be given if the early warning system is there, is one of the best motivation. You know what I do believe is that the localization aspect is extremely important. We definitely need to create this community spirit. Insurance can help, but in my view, we cannot decide either from New York, Zurich, or wherever, the way in which we establish this insurance market locally. And I think that establishing insurance market locally may sound a little bit utopic at this stage, but I think it's extremely important, because that's the way in which you transform something which is a kind of financing from outside to protect people in something which is the community starts to finance itself, its protection methods. And the penetration of insurance and the degree of evolution of community are so nicely correlated, I think they don't need to be demonstrated further.
Thank you so much. We have a question for you, Ambassador Potzel, and 100% agree with the importance of anticipatory action to mitigate disaster impacts, besides increased funding share. To you, what are the key enablers to scale up?
Thank you so much. I think the key enabler really is making the case and creating the political will. I'm always astonished that we still have to make that case so adamantly, because to me it's seemingly so obvious that when you go in early and you have the data in place and you go in early, that you save lives, livelihoods, as I said. So yes, we need to step up our advocacy. We need to step up advocacy with governments, but also with local communities. The issue of trust was mentioned several times here also on the panel. People need to trust the data, they need to trust the solutions, they need to trust the partners they work with. And I think, as was eloquently described, the issue of reaching out to the communities, and we always call them vulnerable. I think a lot of them are extremely resilient, and they know best, what suits their situation. So to reach out and make our case, I think this is really the crucial step. Plus, also on the international arena, a couple of months back, we were here in that same room with the IFRC, ICRC conference, and they adopted, the Red Cross, Red Crescent Societies adopted the first ever resolution on anticipatory action in humanitarian action. And that was really a milestone. And we hope that this can be used also to kind of induce it into the UN system even more. And as all the member states signed up to it, and it was also states there, not only Red Crescent, Red Cross societies, they really bought into this. So that was a huge step forward. And also on other issues, if we implement the OECD DAC recommendations, if we implement vulnerability and disability markers, for instance, that makes a difference, and this enables us to step forward. So I think, and maybe one last point, also the Grand Bargain, which brings together humanitarian organizations, IOs, NGOs, and also states, they also agreed on implementing more AA, and that, I think, are very positive steps in the right direction.
While I have you on the floor, may I quickly ask how if you can speak to how the German government is working to ensure that early warning systems are also focusing on our marginalized groups, disability, displaced people, indigenous communities. Can you quickly go over that as well?
Yeah, please. We just recently had, a couple of weeks back, the Global Disability Summit in Berlin, where we talked about those issues as well, and how to combine early recovery and early action and AA with those issues. And they agreed on a declaration saying that, 15% for the 15%, and we really have to move with this forward. So again, a huge buy-in from international players into this agenda. And for us, really, inclusivity is key. And we work very closely also with the IFRC, as we are working with a lot of also German NGOs. Some of them are here, by the way. They have a booth outside. So if anybody is interested, the Christian Blind Mission is there. Handicap International, big partner for us in this. And also the Arbeiter-Samariter-Bund. So really, we make it a top priority. Look at, the needs of people, really analyze what do vulnerable groups need, then prioritize the most vulnerable in your response, and also deliver the actions in an accessible way, right? I mean, when you deliver cash, how do you reach the most vulnerable? How do you evacuate the most vulnerable? People with mobility issues, this has to be front and center and has to be key in the talks on the response. And as I say, we are doing that very closely with our colleagues.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Blanchard, perhaps I bring you here with, as you sit here on this panel, you are also a representative from a small island development state. And so, in your opinion, how can national governments create the right enabling environment for risk-informed investment? And perhaps how can such investments as well create the, be leveraged to strengthen early warning signs or systems?
Thank you for that question. To create such an enabling environment, we must establish clear policy and regulatory frameworks that integrate disaster risk reduction in national development plans. These policies and frameworks must establish clear roles and responsibilities. And we should also establish standards for public sector, private sector participation in disaster risk reduction. For example, We can streamline permitting processes for developing resilience in, infrastructure. This helps to eliminate a lot of the bureaucracy surrounding these types of projects. We must also establish regulatory frameworks that support disaster risk reduction investments. For example, we can establish, develop risk-sharing mechanisms such as catastrophe bonds, government-backed guarantees to reduce private exposure to disaster risk. Governments can offer tax incentives or subsidies for investment in early warning systems, technologies, and resilience infrastructure projects. Interestingly, the Loss and Damage Fund was created for such an occurrence. However, that fund has not been fully capitalized as yet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Blanchard. Now, I would love to find out from you, Mr. Seaborn. I want us to end on a high and positive note. So I would love to hear some examples of how farmers contribute to the development or functioning of early warning systems. And perhaps maybe these are examples that can cut across countries, though we have nuances and differences across countries and communities. What are some of these examples?
As a board members of the World Farmers Organization, representing the voice of farmers from Africa, a continent where agriculture is not only our livelihood, but our heritage and hope for future. We often talk about early warning system as a tool for resilience, but Africa farmers, they must be tool for action. A flood warning is not just a forecast, it is a signal for when to move livestock. A drought alert is a decision point for when to store water for switch crop. That is why user-centered design is not optional, it is essential. Farmers in Africa are not ready to act, but they must be equipped. That means, firstly, localization of early warning system so that the information reflect regional reality from the Sahel to the Great Lake. Second, multiple format, radio, MSS, voice message in local language, especially in area with limited connection and literacy. Thirdly, trust intermediaries like farmers' organization and cooperative who can help interpret forecast into meaningful advice. In Mauritius, where I come from, we are seeing more intense cyclone, shifting rainfall and salinization of our soil. Our farmers need more than just alert. They need support to transit forecast into on-farm decision. That is where co-design become powerful. WFO is advocating for farmers to be treated not just as a recipient of early warning, but as active contributor across Africa. Farmers are already collecting local weather data, tracking pests and sharing best practices through information network. They formalized their knowledge, empower farmers as partners, and strengthen the feedback loops between producers and policy. To conclude, if we can anticipate action to success, it must start where risks begin, on the farm. Resilience grows when those who are most exposed are almost most engaged. Let's ensure Africa farmers are not just heard, but held as co-creators of early warning and response system fit for the future.
Powerfully said, a wonderful call to action. And speaking about call to actions, Mr. Lies, I'm going to come to you. You've got 60 seconds, maximum 90 seconds, to share what you believe to be your hope. What makes you hopeful?
Well, I believe in humanity, so that makes me hopeful. That's probably because of my age, but I do believe that there is a bridge that we need to accomplish. You know, the contribution of the insurance industry, if I may speak about the insurance industries, these risk modeling, these apparently very theoretical aspects that we can bring to the table in contributing to make things viable. So my deep hope is a more integrated work between the public and the private sector. The private sector is definitively committed to bring its technology, to bring its knowledge. Public sector may introduce the sense of urgency, but I deeply believe that on this type of project, we need to bring the expert from the private sector as soon as possible so that we can shape what we want to do together. The together is for me something very important. There are problems on which, to be honest, making distinction between private sector and public sector does not make any sense. We are human, and there are some human urgencies.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michel Lies, Chairman Zurich Insurance. Thank you very much for joining us. And so I bring you the same question, Mr. Blanchett. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope? Let's be real. There's a cloud that is hanging over us today. Recent geopolitical shifts in foreign policy and development financing is more and more exposing small island development states to a lot of technical and financial risks, which is negatively impacting their operational readiness. And so that has to be addressed. Yes, small island developing states, such as the Caribbean region, we are highly exposed to climatic and tectonic risk and so on. And so we rely on a lot of development assistance in order to build resilience and so on. That is the reality that we face. And so given that situation, I still have a sense of hope that humanity will care more and share more. That is the hope that I have moving forward. Of course, yes, the UNDRR has done so much and continues to do a lot to assist small island developing states. But those nations with the financial wherewithal can certainly do more, they can care more and share more.
Do more, care more, share more. Mr. Glenroy Blanchett, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of National Security, St. Kitts and Nevis. Thank you very much. I bring it to you, Ambassador Potzel. Same question. What gives you hope?
Thank you so much. Look, DRR works. And we've seen that in so many examples. And you remember the video that we saw at the beginning when people described, you know, how it changed sort of their way of handling hazards or disasters. And the man who said like how shocked and in a happy way they were that they saw that after this disaster, so no life was lost. So we have the tools. We know what works, and we have to implement it, but it makes me hopeful that we can see it around the globe, that these tools that we have when implemented in the right way, they do work. And people being here at this conference, it makes me very hopeful, because more people understand how important this work is. So let's continue to do that.
Ambassador Deke Potsil, Special Envoy for Middle East Humanitarian Issues, we say a big thank you to you. I'm going to go straight to Mr. Gunsham Seaborn, Board Member, Africa, World Farmers Organization. What gives you hope, Mr. Seaborn?
For me, the hope is that we must work together. We must have the research, the scientists, the technology coming, because we farmers, we are vulnerable. We need assistance. For example, if we know there is a rise in temperature, we need the researchers to get the seeds that will adapt to this temperature, because we are going to lose. So it is very important to have the partnership, the resource mobilization, funding coming, capacity building, education of farmers, how to adapt with this technology that is coming, with the climate change. All these things we need to be advocate and work together.
We must work together. Thank you so much, Mr. Seaborn. Last but not the least, Country Manager, ActionAid Vanuatu, Ms. Flora Vanu, you have the last word. 90 seconds, what gives you hope?
Thank you. I think what gives me hope is seeing everybody in this arena. People who come in to learn and people who come in to give their learnings to others to achieve in their own context. One main thing is a comprehensive approach of DRR and climate change. We couldn't do DRR without climate change, and also the protections or risk mapping. All these should be all allowed in one platform, and the discussion should be made together and collectively. We are seeing that when we only drive one agenda, there's a lack on the other one. So collective ideas will bring collective solutions from each regions, and it will also allow community to drive. Building constituency and movements is a crucial also for DRR, because if technology didn't work, but people work, people are still there, people are alive, and they can make things happen. And don't leave away nature. Allow nature to take alongside what we are implementing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our panelists, a round of applause for the key conversation and the crucial contributions. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And please do share your key takeaways, any questions, concerns, contributions you may have to our Slido QR code. And as well, it will be shared on WordCloud. And as you go out today, just remember, whatever you do, do not leave anyone behind. Thank you very much. My name is Anita Erskine. Have a great and powerful, successful day.